You're listening to Cottontail's podcast, part of the Silicon Valley Black Project, which produced the documentary film A Place at the Table about the Black pioneers of Silicon Valley. A Place at the Table can be viewed for rent on Vimeo.com on demand /A Place at the Table STEM. Through Cottontail's podcast, the Silicon Valley Black Project will continue to recognize the contributions made by African Americans. We will be featuring African American professionals, technologists in the fields of engineering, administration, and entrepreneurial pursuits from the past and present. Today, we are talking to Andre Chapman, the CEO of Unity Care. Unity Care, under Andre's leadership, is giving foster children the future they deserve as they age out of the foster care system, providing housing, educational opportunities, and hope, improving the lives of foster youth throughout Northern California. You are something. Tell me now, where were you? Were you raised in California, or did you come to California?
No, my family migrated from the South, as most of us that, left, my parents left looking to get out of the racist South and, left, from Sarasota, Florida, because of all the trauma and the racism, didn't want to raise their kids there, and came to Palo Alto. And so they moved, we came out here in 1968, and that was their best decision they ever made in their life was to get out of Sarasota, Florida. And to this day, my mom always, I talk to my cousins back there, and then it's just such a different perspective. Yeah. So we came out here in 1968, and so I grew up in Palo Alto, and my mom taught school in East Palo Alto, and my dad was he was a salesman for a couple of different companies like AB Dick and some copier companies. That was my humble beginning. And that's how I know the Clay family.
Oh, okay. All right.
So Mr. Clay was they were like the Jeffersons when I was growing up. So, so I spent a lot of time in the Clay household growing up. And then, from there, went to school there and then left for college and went to San Jose State and haven't left San Jose since then.
Well, I'm a San Jose State graduate as well.
Okay, go Spartans.
Yeah, hey, there you go. So tell me, where did you work for a high-tech company in human resources, or? No,
so so I went to San Jose State. I majored to start off in criminology. I wanted to be a police officer. To come back and work for Palo Alto Police Department. But as while I was on campus, I had an interaction with the campus police, where they came to our fraternity house and roughed up a couple of myself and our fraternity brothers. And at that point, I said I never want to be a police officer. Although I have an uncle that was a police officer, and so, but and then I changed my major to business, and and focused on wanting to go into business, and coming out of San Jose State, I went into sales. So I was always on the sales side, and worked in tech. Worked for a handful of tech companies in sales, running sales departments, executive sales leader, national director of sales, a general manager. And while I was in college, while I was working in tech, I always had a passion to give back because my mom was a school teacher. So growing up in Palo Alto, I saw the have and the have-nots very clearly. From East Palo Alto, 50 yards on the other side of the freeway, to Palo Alto, which is the richest zip code on the globe, I witnessed the differences. Growing up, because my mom taught school in East Palo Alto, I would spend time, in East Palo Alto. So we had friends there, but you go from one extreme to the other. You go to a friend in Palo Alto, who lives, up in the hills, and then, plenty of resources. Then you go to a friend in East Palo Alto that doesn't really have anything. They can barely, keep a roof over their head and didn't have the resources. And so I was always intrigued by how zip code really determines your resources and what type of access you have, to experience, a great beginning. And so going to San Jose State, I actually didn't even know that we were poor until I was in a class at San Jose State. My mom, by that point, my parents had divorced when I was in middle school, but my mom had worked 3 jobs. And that's why I was always at the Clays house. Yeah. Because the Clays, the imagery I had of the Clays was, I didn't know a black family like that. Mm-hmm. Right? The Clays and the Greens, some of the black families and the Michauds. But I spent a lot of time growing up in the Clay household. And, Mr. Clay used to always have folks from tech come in and, they'd always be at the house, and I would just be sitting at the table listening, mm-hmm. Just like a little kid trying to listen to what they're talking about. Because these people would be coming from all over the country, and this person is the CFO of this corporation or the CEO of this corporation. They were black, and I had never seen that before. Yeah. The closest I ever saw that was the Jeffersons. That's how I always say this was, Mr. Clay would drive his, he had running his own company and jumping in his Mercedes. He had every suit in the world in his closet. So it was always it gave me an imagery of something I had not seen. Mm-hmm. And so then coming out of San Jose State, majoring in business, because of my upbringing, my mom being a teacher, I always wanted to give back. And when I left to go to college, and I have two other siblings, so I have a brother and a sister, and I was the youngest of the 3. But by the time I left to go to college, it was just my mom, and so she became a foster parent. Oh. And so I was 18 in college, and she basically became a foster parent for a 10-year-old who was my little sister. And, and so my mom raised her, and, all of us were involved in raising her, and I was the big brother. And so when I got out of college, I was in tech I was a national director of sales for a software company, and a client of mine, it was right after the 89 Loma Prieta earthquake. A client of mine who his office was impacted by the quake, and they needed to relocate all their technology to another location, mm-hmm. Contacted me and said, we need to move. Can you come down, bring down, a team so that we can help move our technology to another building? And when I was there, he had mentioned that he was on the board of this nonprofit. And I had also had a fraternity brother that was in LA at the time that basically was working for the same nonprofit. Mm. And so he invited me over, and I had a chance to go to this house. It was on 55th in Manchester, and it was a Victorian house. It had 6 boys living in there. They had a ping pong table and a pool table, and they had that game called Pong. Back then it was a game called Pong. And I said, what is this? And my fraternity brother said, this is a group home. I was like, what is a group home? I had no idea what it was. Mm. He said, this is for kids in foster care. And my only connection to foster care was really my little sister. And so when I came back in town, at this point, she was at San Jose State. And so I contacted her, and I said, Laurel, tell me about your journey in foster care. And if it wasn't for the grace of God and my mother stepping in, she would have bounced around from pole to post like most foster kids do. And so I started doing research on foster care. And, at that time, the Santa Clara County had a children's shelter that had kids sleeping on the floor on cots. And most of the kids there were black and brown kids. And so I decided to take the home I had purchased a couple of years ago as my first property, and turn that into where I was living at that time, turn that into a residential group home. Mm-hmm. And I just got married, had my first child, and then I came home and said, I want to turn this into a foster home for kids, for young men. And so I took about a year to do that. And on August 14th, 1993, we brought in our first foster child, young man, our first young man. That was our first young person to the program. And I had, at that point moved. And so I'd kind of created a formula that I would, move, turn the home. I would go get another home and turn it into another foster home. But at the same time, I was still working in tech. Mm-hmm. Because tech was paying the bills, and plus, I never had imagined that what I want to do as kind of my ministry will become, a full-time occupation. And so from 1993 to 1999, I still worked in tech and was on the weekends going to the foster homes. And I hired a bunch of my fraternity brothers from San Jose State, Phi Beta Sigma fraternity from San Jose State, to be there every day, the mentors, the role models, really the motivators for these young men that were coming into our program, giving them exposure to college campus that they never even knew anything about going to college, and really just bringing a new perspective around mentorship to these young men. And so I did that. Then about 7 years of running parallel careers, it was really too much for me, because my passion was with the kids, but my economies was with the company that was going public, and I was, an executive staff. And so I was trying to balance that, and but you can't serve two masters. And so I was praying about what to do, because it was really challenging. The organization was growing. We had about 50 employees. There was 5 homes. And then at the same time, my career was really taking off. So I was really in a tug of war. And I would tell you, there was a moment in time where I say that's times when God shows up. I was, I don't know if you remember Glenn Toney.
Yes.
Okay, so Glenn at that time was executive vice president of Applied Materials. And him and Jim Morgan, who was the CEO of Applied Materials, they had hosted a private dinner for Coretta Scott King. And Glenn had called me because he knew I was really, I was trying to do this nonprofit, but I was still doing my tech stuff. So he called me and said, "Hey, Andre, I'm going to invite you to this private dinner we're having with Coretta Scott King at the Fairmont. Maybe about 20 of us are going to come, so we'd love for you to come." And I said, "Absolutely." So I went, and it was, it was a very intimate setting. John Vasconcellos was there, Senator John Vasconcellos at the time, and I was talking to him. And then, Glenn said, "Come over here, I want you to meet, meet Mrs. King." And she was sitting in a chair. And when I went to go meet her, Glenn said, "Oh, this is Andre. He started a nonprofit work with kids." I thought he was going to say, "This is Andre, who he works in tech," but he didn't say that. And what she did was, she at that moment grabbed my hand, looked at me, and said, "I want to pray over you." And she stopped the room, and she said, she prayed over me. And I have a picture of that actually in my office, because someone happened to take a picture of it. But at that moment, she prayed over me about, the impact that I would have in, serving thousands and thousands and thousands of young folks. And so it was just one of those moments where you just freeze and you walk away, just being in this place of, the Lord is, this confirmation, God is confirming what I need to do. And so, 6 months after that, I walked away from tech to focus on Unity Care full time. And the rest is history. That was, we've been, we're 28 years into this work now, and, we've served thousands and thousands and thousands of young folks in the foster care system. I've employed, thousands of employees, and we're across 9 different counties, trying to ensure no young person leaves the foster care system homeless. And it's been a journey.
Has it been mostly in Northern California, or are you also affiliated down in Southern California?
Well, we did have an office down there, many, many years ago. We did have transitional housing in Southern California. But mainly we're here now. We're mainly in Northern California. So we go from Santa Clara County all the way up to Tahoe. We go all the way up to Nevada, El Dorado, Placer, Sacramento, San Francisco, San Mateo, Alameda. So, so we have a large geographical area that we cover. We've, in the last 3 years, we've just released our new strategic plan. And And so we've done, we're going to do a merger with another organization, and we decided not to do that, and we spun off all of our community-based services to get very similar focus on housing, because this is, we're just seeing such a devastation for kids that age out of foster care. They're the fastest growing homeless population. They're the fastest growing population in the prison system. And most people don't know that the statistics of kids in foster care, you only have about 55% graduate from high school. Less than 10% go to college. And that's a JC. About 3% go to a 4-year college. So the data is horrific for kids that are in the foster care system, and mainly because many of these young folks don't have a stable home, and they end up living in, 15 different communities, going to 10, 15 different schools, not really having the ability to, learn, life skills and develop long-term relationships, because they're always the very transient population. And so what happens is they age out of the system without really the maturity or the skill sets to, go off on their own. And imagine an 18-year-old trying to pay rent somewhere in this economy is it's just impossible.
Right.
So we've been very focused on expanding our housing to ensure no young person is homeless.
I don't think we all understand the importance of a permanent address.
Mm-hmm.
That can lead to jobs. It can lead to a certain kind of education. There's all kinds of things that are tied into that permanent address.
Absolutely. Let me tell you about just a quick story. And so, again, we've been doing this now 28 years, and we have so many stories of young folks that have gone on to do great things, and as well as we have stories of young folks, that ended up in prison. And so this one young man, and I'm telling you this story just because, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this story. This one young man came to our program. He was about 16 years old. He was in our residential group home, and he graduated. He was 18, and he ended up having an episode, a bipolar episode, his first break, and he ended up having to live in an adult living situation, and it really wasn't good for him. And then he ended up getting into the service. And so he went into the service. He was there for about 3 years. And then he just, I look up one day and he's in my office. At that point, he was probably about 22, and he was homeless. Mm-hmm. And so he would come in the office almost every other day, just looking for help. But he was, he wasn't on any type of medication. He was in this place of constant survival. Mm-hmm. So you couple that with any type of mental health challenges, it just amplifies that. And so he was coming to the office, creating a lot of chaos in the office. He was coming, he wasn't clean. And so, and he was always, losing something on the street, or someone beat him up, or someone did something to him. Mm-hmm. And so we have apartment units, and we have a long wait list of kids to get into our apartment units. But, this had been going on for 3 years, and I said to the staff, and said, he's going to end up dying on the streets if we don't figure out how we can get this young man to housing. Because while he was coming in, we would get him a job, but then he would lose it because he would lose his bus pass, or he would lose his ID, or someone would rob him and take his stuff. And so he couldn't hold down the guy, couldn't maintain the job. And so one of our apartments had come up open, and I had kind of convinced the staff to just put him in there for now. Mm-hmm. Until we can find him another place. And so we put him in there, and it was really hard on the program because he must have gone through about 4 different roommates. He just could not, I didn't want to take any medication. And then over time, over that year, you began to see a change in him. He began to, we got him a couple of jobs. He was stable in the job. And then all of a sudden you start seeing him feeling stable about his living situation. And, he had problems, living there, but eventually it clicked. I remember one day he got a job at Tesla, and he came to the office and was so excited, had his badge, and he showed us, and now he was saving money, and things just started to really turn good for him. And so, so this was probably about 4 years ago. And And he moved out about 2 years ago, moved out right before the pandemic. So he had been there for about so it was about 5 years ago. So he moved out right before the pandemic. He got his own apartment. And about a year ago, right in the middle of the pandemic, he became a deacon at his church. And then 2 weeks ago, this young man got married. Oh. And so I went to his wedding, and it was just the most amazing thing to see where he is today versus where he was back then and how far he's come. And, most of these young folks don't have long connections or deep connections to family, oftentimes because, I always say the system gets in the way. There's only about, most of the kids that come into foster care, about 80% of the kids coming to foster care come in because of what's called general neglect, which is poverty. Mm-hmm. So, we criminalize poverty in this society. And so if you get the families what they need, give them the support they need, parenting skills, food in the refrigerator, we wouldn't see we would see less than half of those kids in foster care. So he just got married, doing great, great job, beautiful bride, and it's just a great story. And so we went to his wedding, a couple of the staff, and my wife went to his wedding 2 weeks ago, and it was just a great scene to see this young man become who he is today. And of course, he's got a lot of growing to do, but just such a great place.
Wow, that is an incredible story. But when he got that apartment, even though he couldn't get along with others, just the idea he could come back to the same place every day. It was stability. So we focus on what we call our 5 pillars of success, mm-hmm. which is housing, employment, education, well-being, and unconditional care. And that first pillar is housing. Because if we don't have our young folks in a place that's safe and secure, then it's very difficult to work on anything else around them, going to school or maintaining a job or their mental health or them, having long-term connections with positive people. It's just too difficult. And we see it all the time. And that's why what a lot of people don't realize is within the foster care system, within 2 years after kids age out, you find about 40% of those kids are homeless. What are the social workers? How are they responding to your homes, or do they work with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, we have probably about 15 to 20 different counties that place young folks with us. Okay. So the way the system works is that young folks, there's a call, a neighbor calls because they see a young person, looking disheveled, or they go to school, they do what's called a CPS call. And CPS comes out and they investigate. And unfortunately, when they come out and they investigate, if they go into a home and there's no food in the refrigerator, or there's the PG&E is not on, or there's no furniture in the house, they will look at that situation and look at that as general neglect. Like this young child is being neglected. Based oftentimes on their individual standards. And so they then open up a case, and then in many cases, they remove those children and put them into foster homes. And what happens is most of the time, particularly for Black kids, they bounce around these foster homes, and to the point where, the foster homes, don't want them, or they can't meet their needs. And then they come into what's called residential treatment homes. And then they stay in those homes until they age out, or can go back home with their mom or whatever their parent is. But a lot of times, and particularly for Black and brown kids, there's a disproportionate number of us that are in foster care. So you just take Santa Clara County as an example. There's about 2.3% of African Americans. Well, the foster care system makes up about 9 to 10% of us. So if you look at those numbers, it's 4 to 5 times greater than the general population. Mm-hmm. If you look at Latinos in Santa Clara County, they make up about 37%. They make up about 67% of the general population. So they're of the kids in foster care. So they're double. So there's really a lack of cultural proficiency and understanding how to engage communities of color that's coming from these formalized systems. They're always going to default to, they're not keeping the kids safe, so we're going to remove the child. Versus very different if it was a Caucasian child, which they don't remove those kids. Oftentimes they look at what they can do to maintain those families, give them the supports they need. Right. Unfortunately for Black and brown kids, particularly African Americans, you find disproportionate decisions being made at every decision tree in the foster care system. And so for Unity Care, for many years, we've had, different types of programs, from foster homes, to treatment homes, to services to strengthen the families, to services that when a CPS calls, our staff are going out there with them. So we've had services all through the continuum of the system. So we start off with one program, which are homes, but that became a very small percentage of all the things that we do, because we've had services at the front end to prevent families from coming in, and then at the back end to prevent this young person from being homeless. And then we provide a lot of mental health services as well. And so for many years, we've done a lot of different services. And again, we've had programs in a lot of different counties. So for the last 3 years, we've really gone very, very focused solely deep on expanding our transitional housing, which is for young folks that end up aging out that have no place to go.
Yes. That's what I was looking at your site and wondering, okay, so you're 18 years old. Is that about when you age out? So, yes. So then are you then providing housing for them at a lower rate? Do they go and look for roommates, or how does this happen?
So think about your grandson and your grandson going to college. And the first year, they typically live in the dorms, right? And then maybe the second or third year, they might want to get a house with a roommate. And then eventually you want them to, as they get older, they get their own place. So that same housing continuum is what we offer kids in foster care. We have that same housing continuum. So we have dorm style housing, which are apartment units where, we have apartments in San Francisco and in San Jose and in Oakland. So our apartment units, they have a live-in property manager who is there to make sure, they're not partying at 2 a.m, just like in the dorms, as a resident advisor, right? So we have apartment units where a lot of the young folks will come first into the apartment units. And then also we have shared homes, and that's for someone wants to live, in a home with 4 or 5 roommates. They're showing more independence than a young person that may have been in apartments. It's the journey that we take them on until they get to the point where they can get their own place. So, when they come live with us, it doesn't cost them any money to live with us. We are preparing them for when they age out of the system, that they now have a job or they're going to school full time, and now they're in, affordable housing. So we get them ready for that, that next stage, when they get to 21 or 22, which is still very hard at 21 and 22, as you can imagine. And so at that point, they're out of the system. The young folks age out at 18, but in California, a law was passed back in 2012 where they can opt back in up until age 21, or because they can leverage some housing resources so that they'll end up homeless.
Well, now, with the cost of housing in the Bay Area, there has to be some challenges when it comes to the apartments and where they are located and the safety issues. How are you handling that?
Well, that's a good question because, Kathy, that's always been a challenge. We have about 150 beds of housing as an organization, and it's a combination of properties that we own and properties that we rent, as well as developers that we partner with that will do carve-outs in their community. So we'll take a developer like Mid-Penn Housing, who has probably, 300 units. They have, maybe in this area, maybe have 100 different housing communities. And the communities might range from, a 100-unit community to, say, a 300 or 400-unit community. So we will work with them to have them do a carve-out and do a set-aside of, say, 10 units that will be set aside for the young folks coming through our program. So you take a young person that's lived in our dorms, lived in our shared housing, and now they're 22, they want to get their own apartment. Now we have an individual apartment they may get with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, or even with a roommate where they can afford the rent. Because that's the biggest challenge. As hard as it is for us to pay for rent, imagine them. It's nearly impossible. Right. So we have to develop partnerships with developers that are willing to do discounted rates. And also we partner with developers that are building affordable housing where it's taking 30% of that young person's income to allow it to be affordable for them to live there. So we have a lot of different housing initiatives, and we're, again, Our goal is for the young folks that are in our program that when they age out, that we want to give them a 5-year window where they're only paying $500 a month for rent. Just like when our kids come back from college at 22, 21 to 23, they can stay at home. They don't have those worries. Well, for these young folks, when they age out of the system, housing right now, that's their survival. If they don't have a place to live, then, they're on the streets. And so we've created a model where a young person can come into our program, they can stay in our housing continuum, and then eventually you'll get their own apartment. And when they're in that apartment, they can do a 5-year lease where they're only paying $500 a month for rent, giving them enough opportunities to still develop, get their job, or they're going to school, as well as maturity-wise of having their own place, but not have that burden of the pressure of paying $1,700, $1,800, $2,000 a month for rent, which is impossible for them.
Try $3,500. Yeah.
Especially in San Francisco and right here in Santa Clara County.
Oh my God, it's awful. Okay, they age out, but still they may have issues of their own. Do you have a mentoring? Do you have anyone that mentors these children? How does that work?
Yeah, so what we do is we still have case managers that work with them. And so one of the goals of the case managers, while we have them before we leave, is to identify at least 5 positive people in their life that's going to be connected to them once they leave the system. So that, that oftentimes, again, they haven't had the network of people that have the resources to support them. And so building that infrastructure, helping them identify mentors, or there's terms called CASAs, or it could be, a teacher that they had when they were in 10th grade, or it could be a football coach that they had. But who do they identify that they can call on a Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and say, hey, I got a flat tire? It could be family members. It could be an uncle. Oftentimes kids, these young folks have one thing in their head about why they weren't with their family, and then the family oftentimes has a different impression of what happened, right? So there's oftentimes you find that kids were removed from families really for the wrong reasons. Then there was really no effort on trying to reunite that young person with that family. It might be just the mom. Maybe the mom had a drug addiction. But then there's all of these other sides of the family. There's the paternal side that oftentimes you don't see that very aggressive outreach to fathers to get them engaged with their kids. So we try to circle that young person with as many resources, whoever they identify as their family as possible. So when they age out, they have natural supports that they can lean on. But our case managers do stay engaged with them. We have a program that once they age out, it's called our Navigator program, where not only are we have staff that can still support them, but they also can help them with housing vouchers. Because a lot of these young folks qualify for that. If a young person is 21 and they're out of the system, they're nowhere ready to jump into a full-time job. They have to do it because they have to survive. But if they still want to go to school, we want to make sure they have that opportunity. So we can get them a housing voucher, or we can help with their rent while they go to school part-time and work part-time. That's the ultimate goal.
So how many kids would you say, or young people, I should say, are in your system at one time?
In the foster care system?
Yeah, consistently.
In the United States, it's about 500,000 kids.
Okay.
About 450,000 kids are in the system at any one given time.
And how many would you able to help?
Well, so in California, there's about 70,000 kids in foster care. We serve we used to serve about 7,500 youth and families a year will come through our doors. We did that for the majority of the years we've been around. 3 years ago, when we spun off all of our community-based programs to focus just on housing, we've been serving about 350 young folks that have come through our housing each year. And so if you think about the Bay Area, in context of the Bay Area, in the Bay Area, there's probably about 15,000, 20,000 kids in foster care. And all ages, from 0 all the way up to 21.
Right.
So on any given year, across the United States, about 20,000 young people leave the system, and they're headed oftentimes to the streets. California, it's probably about 5,000 to 6,000 a year. California is the largest foster care system in the country. So California has the most. So in California, there's anywhere between probably 5,000 to 7,000 young folks every year age out. And so that's that population that we want to grab and ensure they don't age out to the streets.
Yeah. How do they find out about you? Do they find out through the social welfare system? Or?
Yeah, most of the times, young folks that are referred to us are coming through their social workers or their friends or, their probation officers or their mental health clinician. And so that's how they come to us and they're referred to us. And then they basically, take a look at our properties. Our properties are online. They can go on our YouTube channel and see the properties. And because, every young person, and because we have properties in a lot of different communities, that gives them greater choices. So, just as you mentioned earlier about, where your grandson went to American River College, if we have a young person that's, grew up in the foster care system in Santa Clara County, but has a grandmother living in Sacramento, and he looks at our housing, and we have housing in Sacramento, it's a perfect fit. Yeah. So he can go to Sacramento, be close to his grandmother, and then also be in our housing, or go to school there.
Mm-hmm. Also, I went online to look at your site, and it had a list of donations. People can donate furniture, and is that still ongoing?
Yeah, we did have to stop a lot of that during COVID. Yeah. And so we haven't started it up as rapidly as we used to, but we're always looking for, people that want to help, furnish a young person's apartment, his very first or her very first apartment, or buy pots and pans and, utensils and laundry, all the things that young people need when they walk into these apartments or walk into the home. Because most of them, they just travel with a plastic bag of their clothes and that's it.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine, the scarcity of, they're not used to having things because they're used to having to leave, one home to another home, and oftentimes their stuff is left behind, or it doesn't really have meaning to it because they're just trying to survive.
Well,
so yes, on our line there are donations.
I saw your connection with you and Amazon. How did that come about? Where you can click onto Amazon and you can have this wish list.
Yeah, so what we do is every year we do a project called Santa's Helper. And we've been doing this for a long time. Even if you look at our Facebook, you can see all the years. It's a competition that we do every year where we want to make the Christmas holiday the best Christmas holiday a young person's ever had. And so we do competitions between the different locations to make this home, really the Christmas spirit. And we bring in our community partners, volunteers that come in, and they join the young folks to help them put up the Christmas trees and the lights. And then we do a competition where the judges go out and they judge. They pick one night, they go to all the different locations and they judge them. And then the winning location, is celebrated. And we partner with corporations, and Amazon is one of them, because you can go to Amazon, and people that want to buy things, it's so easy now to go to Amazon. They can go in there and they can buy, whatever the kids' wish list is that we posted on there. They can then buy it directly and have it shipped directly to the young person.
Nice. Hey, no middleman there.
No middleman.
Your first adventure was to take your home and turn it into a group home. Were you living there at the time, or did you move out and then?
Well, I lived there up until the day that they said that we're going to be licensed, and I had to move.
Okay.
My wife and I had to move. My son, we had to move, and so it was in 1993. And so the great thing is I had mentors that you look up to, and it's just as Mr. Clay. Another one was Perry Taylor, who he had worked at Pac Bell and had always was buying property. And very early on, I went to him to ask him if I could use some of his homes to turn into, these residential group homes. And so, because it was hard. When I went out looking for a home, nobody wanted to rent a home to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I just landed on the decision that, okay, I got to turn my home into one, because if I'm going to do this, no better person to do it but me.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly as I was starting off, we didn't have any money. And so I turned my home into it. And then Perry had another home that we then moved to, and then we turned that home into it. And then he had another home we moved to, and we turned that home into it. And so 7 years, I bounced around, we bounced around, moving from house to house as I was having more kids.
I have to stop you right now. What kind of woman are you married to? She's an angel.
Well, let me say this, and you're right. So my first wife, where I had my three kids with, you're absolutely right, an angel. My second wife's an angel as well.
All right.
But, I wrote about this in my book. I wrote my book, I released my book last year called Roses and Concrete, Giving Foster Youth the Future They Deserve. And I talk about this. I talk about the sacrifice in wanting to do this, because this wasn't a job for me. This was my ministry. I wanted to do something to get back. So I never looked at it as a job. And which is why, I ran parallel careers for the first, 7 years, because it was just something I wanted to do. It was never going to be, I never imagined that this was going to be my profession. But I just kept finding all the inefficiencies and the problems within the county systems. And then again, like I said, it was, you can't serve two masters. And so, so the beginnings were very humble beginnings, because, it was bootstrapping things to start the program and get it off the ground, and then to keep building and growing it. And then once I came full time in 1999, 2000, right around that time period, we really grew. The organization doubled in size over the next couple of years. We expanded into other counties, and hired, went from 30 or 40 employees, about 130, and got up to about 190, about 200 employees. And so we just kept growing, because I was really about fixing the system where I saw that there were problems. Wherever the young person or family wasn't getting what was necessarily their right to get, and how do we treat them, I just felt that we could do it better. Yeah. Particularly serving, our own community and serving Black kids, because, that's what you see in the foster care system. There's a disproportionate number of Black kids. And that is, and once they get in the system, they just don't get out.
Are there possibilities that some of these young people become part of your organization?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. We have a lot of them that we hire.
Okay. I'm thinking there's a great employment pool there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them have gone on and then come back and work in the organization. It's kind of tough hiring them the day they graduate, because then they're having to come tell folks that they used to be hanging out with what to do. We've seen that blow up a couple times.
Okay. Here's what I'm thinking. You could also start a trade school, because you've got all these homes. They have to be maintained. So you could have a school of plumbing, teaching people how to paint homes, repair appliances, all kinds of things. Are you doing anything like that?
Well, we used to do all of those things.
Okay.
We had a workforce employment program. We did this event every year called Youth Live. I don't know if you saw that online, but it was an event where every year our youth would come and sell their art. They would paint, do about 300 paintings every year, because art is very therapeutic, and then we would sell it at the event. So we've always had a variety of different type of entrepreneur programs for young folks. But today we decided to be very singular focused on housing, and then bring in partner organizations that do exactly what you just said. And we have really strong partnerships to give our young folks jobs. There are some really amazing foster parents. A lot of amazing people that do this work. Just like with anything, there's good and bad in everything. And so it's fortunate when you can find where it really worked well. Because the other side is that, the data says it's not working well. And but there are those situations, like I said, with my mom. If it hadn't been for my mom, my little sister would have been bouncing around. So it takes people like that. It's tough when you're raising kids that have been traumatized, and kids that have, don't want to be there. And then you bring in sometimes, it's a different culture, different ethnicity, just how we grew up, how we were raised, it's a lot.
Yes.
And a lot of those kids come into those environments traumatized because, they want to be with their parents, regardless of what happened.
Right.
They want to be with their parents. And so it is definitely a tough thing.
What was the most rewarding project for you?
Oh, there are so many. That's a good question. Yeah. The most rewarding project, probably what comes to mind was when we started and we were able to purchase apartment units. That really gave so many more choices for young folks of where they wanted to live and where they could live. That's been a big inspiration for us to go out and partner with some of these different cities and counties, and we partner with the state. We have a lot of folks that we partner with, developers, and to be able to, particularly in this really tough place to live, to be able to secure and purchase apartment units. And so that's been a really positive thing for us, and we're doing more of it. I mean, We just opened up a kind of a dorm style 10-unit location in Oakland, right behind Grand Lake Theater. And this house is so amazing. The Piedmont area, and it is a phenomenal location. Wow. We're excited about that. And that's going to be a great place for young men. And that one's for young men. And we serve about 50% both. We have a lot of young ladies in our program. We have an apartment unit right by San Francisco State for 10 young ladies. Another great place. So the apartment units for us has really been a big add-on, because that allows us to serve more and also give young folks options to be in their own spaces.
What kind of impact do you think you've had on the communities?
I'm a very outspoken person when it comes to inequalities for African American community, and particularly when it comes to kids of any ethnicity and any race. So I think that, because I think everything is driven by policy. Policy drives practice, and so I look at policies through the lens of is this policy disproportionately impacting this community in a different way? And when I see that, I'm like a shark. I just go after it, and we got to change it, because we have to make sure our systems are equal and fair. I also really focus on customer service. Our systems, really understanding how do you effectively engage communities of color. It's really hard for, a social worker that, grew up privileged, let's say they grew up in Palo Alto or Los Altos or wherever, and then they go into East San Jose and they try to, understand that community. It's really tough. So they're going to bring their perspectives, their upbringing, their values into community that, that's not their experiences, and or their experiences with, the system has been negative. And so I try to bridge those gaps, and we've started programs to help bridge those gaps so that we minimize, the conflict, but also improve the learning that happens so that people are making decisions that better value the families, because we just feel devalued in our systems, and we see it today. There's just a sense of devaluation of us as people. And so those are the things I do a lot of training on with the state. I do a lot of training at the county. I do a lot of trainings at corporations. It's how do you effectively engage the African ancestry community so that we are lifting the communities up and not tearing the communities down. The system should be a place of healing and not a place of hurting. No one should be injured by coming into the system. And those are the things I focus on. But I've always been focused on how do you fix the system so we work ourselves out of a job. That we don't need to be at the back end trying to serve a family where if we had done something different at the front door, wouldn't even have a need for our services. And I think that's my biggest impact to the system.
So it sounds like then your impact is going to be not only policy changing, but training and inclusion.
Yeah, I think right now, I've been doing a lot of speaking about understanding the journey of the African American and understanding how history and the legacy of discrimination shows up today in everything that we do. And everything that we do, it shows up. And so how do you educate those communities that don't look like us to understand that journey so that they can have some sense of what that looks like and then be able to connect to it? Because it's all about connecting. So I do a lot of speaking around that. I just went and spoke at a church in Saratoga Federated Church. I just spoke there last month. But, speaking to that church about the legacy of discrimination going from slavery to now and how it shows up right here in Santa Clara County. People were in awe because they'd never heard this before. Because we know our system doesn't educate us. It indoctrinates us. So we don't know about our history, just as, folks that don't look like us don't know about the history either.
Right. There's a lot of discrimination in not only in the Black community and the brown community, but in the white community as well. And I think a lot of those young people are being lost in the system. Do you know of any organizations that are helping them in the same way, other than your own, other people out there?
In the foster care system, you have everybody. Caucasians, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, very small percent of Asians. So in Unity Care, we serve probably about a third of everything. So for a lot of Caucasian families are in foster care. There's a lot of organizations that serve. The most of the organizations, social service organizations, are led by white folks. So there's not that many African Americans or Latino folks leading community-based organizations that are serving young folks in the foster care system. And so no, there's a lot of organizations that serve that population. But you're right. There is the economic discrimination that happens between the have and the have-nots, and access and resources. You find that, I won't say parallel, but you find those same challenges.
Yeah.
You go to East San Jose, at some of these high schools, you have a lot of white kids that go to those high schools, and so they're getting the same resources that the Latino and the Black kids are getting there. When it looks at the books that they get, and you compare that to the kids that go to Los Gatos High School, they got books that are 2 years old, and the kids at East San Jose, they got books that are 25 years old.
Yeah. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you wonder why, the performance is different when you get to the SATs, or the performance is different when you get to college. Well, because it was the resources at this school were not equal, and that's why I always say, these are all of our kids. It takes a village, and so those parents that have kids at Los Gatos High School should be just as mad about what's happening, as the parents that have their kids at James Lake High School.
Yeah, should be.
Peace out there.
But I want to thank you for talking to me and talking to my audience out there and telling them about yourself. Is there anything that we can do? I know we can donate. Is there? And they should go to your site, and that would be.
You go to www.unitycare.org, and then they should follow us on all the social media handles. We also have another website because we started an initiative to fight COVID within the Black community. It's called COVID-19 Black.
Now, are you going to be speaking anywhere soon, or talking with anyone, or having some type of?
Yeah. So my website is just andrechapman.net.
Okay.
And I have on there places I go speak, and so I do have some speaking engagements coming up. And we're always looking for people that if they want to get involved even further. There's things on our website that people want to get involved in that, further supporting some of our young folks. We always take volunteers. People want to come out and do tutoring, or come out and take a young person shopping, or whatever the case, whatever someone's talents are and their interests are.
If they wanted to donate, is there a location where they can take their donations?
Well, so they would have to first, because of COVID, they would have to go to the website and then contact us. And then we have to get pictures of whatever it is, because we also are very mindful that we don't give kids, stuff that we wouldn't take, And so someone has some really nice furniture, we take that all day long, because we always need new furniture.
Do you pick up the furniture, or do you have a go-between?
Yes. Yeah, we pick up the furniture. We make arrangements. So nice couches, end tables, televisions, not the old televisions, but the new kind.
Not necessarily smart, but just kind of intelligent. Yes.
Someone that's getting rid of their 50-inch that they've had, for the last 5 years, and and now they went and got a smart one. Some things like that.
Yeah,
right?
I gotcha. I really appreciate everything you're doing. I'm just so glad you're there, and that this organization exists. And thank you for walking away from that tech job. I know it was hard.
Very hard.
Yeah, very hard.
It's in my book. If you want to read the book, Roses in Concrete is the name of the book. And it's the whole journey of it. Roses and Concrete. Got it. And can you get it at Amazon or? Yes, you can get it at Amazon. You get it from my site. Yes, you can get it from anywhere.
Perfect.
From Barnes and Nobles. It's called Roses in Concrete: Giving Foster Kids the Future They Deserve. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Andre, for sharing your journey with us. Through your work, you are changing lives and giving hope to the young people of tomorrow. I hope your work and contributions to those young lives will inspire those benefiting from your ministry to play it forward. You can donate money and furniture to the organization by going to the website of unitycare.com. And also, you might want to read Andre's book, Roses in Concrete. It's available on Amazon. Thank you, Andre Chapman, and thank you for listening.